I always tell people that it's not fear of failure that makes people fail. It's fear of success, because everybody fails in life, and we've all developed mechanisms to deal with failure. You know, when I fail at this, I'm going to go out with my friends and do this or whatever. We have ways to make ourselves feel better when we fail, but there's no mechanism to deal with success, because success means when you succeed at something, you have done something that you have never done before. That's the very definition of success.
Welcome to Who's Missing, a podcast that gets you thinking about who's missing from your world, at work and in life. We're closing out the season with a very special guest today, Michael Goy. He is a 4-time Emmy-nominated director, cinematographer, writer, and producer who's known for his work on American Horror Story, Glee, My Name is Earl, and Avatar, The Last Airbender on Netflix. The list goes on and on and on. He's been in the business for a few decades, and he knows a lot about what it takes, and it might surprise you what it takes to build a life in the arts. He's also the co-chair of the Diversity Task Force for the Directors Guild of America, and just a really kind human being with what I can only describe as a healthy outlook on life. He joins us today to discuss his journey from Chicago to Hollywood, the role that mentorship plays in his life, and embracing the discomfort of success. When I think of Michael, the word that comes to mind for me is humility. I'm Emily Drake, and this is Who's Missing. I think those of us who aren't in creative fields imagine creatives to be like, we don't eat, it's all about the art. But you're obviously a human being too. So how do you relate to being human in that way? Sleeping, eating, basics.
I sleep 2.5 hours a night on average. And, I eat when I'm hungry.
Well, that's great. Have you always been someone who needed little sleep to be who you are?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually 3.5 hours a night, but lately it's been 2.5. So.
As a kid, were you a night owl or a morning lark?
Both.
Both. How many people were in your house growing up?
Just my mom, dad, and my sister. That's it.
And where did you grow up in Chicago?
Near North Side.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in Chicago and the move to LA? How to make that transition? We're introduced, by the way, by way of Christina, who's just done that very thing. Moved from Chicago to LA. And as the story goes with the people I know and love that have done that, it takes what it takes. But what's your story?
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago, in the city of Chicago, and the neighborhood was largely Puerto Rican that I grew up in, so all my friends were Puerto Rican, and early on I became enamored of watching movies, going to movies. There was a theater called the Parkway Theater that I could walk to when I was a kid, and they would show 3 double features a week of anything that they could buy for $50. And so they had very eclectic double features, like Charlton Heston's Will Penny with Phyllis Diller's Did You Hear the One About the Traveling Sales Lady? And I would just go see everything. So that was my early film education, is going to the Parkway Theater. Very early on, as a result, when I was 8 years old, I decided that I wanted to make movies. My parents asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to go to Hollywood and I want to make movies. And they said, well, that's what you should do then. It's not like we had the money to do a lot of stuff, but they put together some money to get a used 8mm film camera, and I started making movies and progressed to 16mm films with a used Bolex that I got from a guy who used to make fishing films on the weekend. That was about the time that I went to high school. And so I was making 16 millimeter films when I was in high school. It was just kind of a progression that never stopped. I resisted moving to Los Angeles for quite a while because I worked on a big movie that came through Chicago, and it was not a really great experience. So I didn't want to initially get into, the Hollywood filmmaking. I made 6 feature films and over 300 commercials while I was still based out of Chicago, and documentaries, feature documentaries for PBS. But ultimately, you have to be where the deals are made, and the deals are made in Los Angeles.
What do you think people get wrong, and what do you think people get right about how deals are made in Los Angeles?
Because I mentor a lot of young filmmakers, and I speak to a lot of student groups. And the thing I think that they don't understand is that when they're in film school, it's the only time that they're going to be able to do what they want, the way they want it. As soon as you leave film school, and as soon as you make a movie, you shoot a movie or direct a movie, whatever, that uses somebody else's money for financing, that movie ceases to be yours. And it doesn't matter if you've written it or directed it or shooting it or whatever. It's not your movie. It belongs to the people who put up the money to have it made. That's the most difficult concept, I think, for young people entering the industry to understand. And I see it all the time in social media influencers, because for whatever reason, a lot of the social media influencers, once they start getting popular, get directed toward me. And because they're trying to get into the regular film business, but they run headlong into this wall when they realize, well, wait a minute, I can't just do what I did on my own in my room. Now there are people telling me what I can and cannot do. So very few of them can really adjust to that idea that it's a joint venture. Everything in the filmmaking world, in movies and television shows, is a collaborative venture financed by people who feel that this product will be able to sell. I've only really once in my entire life been able to say that I made a movie and it was exactly the movie I wanted to make, exactly the way I wanted to make it. And that was when I made a movie called Megan is Missing, about abducted and murdered children and internet predators. And because it was entirely financed by myself and my 2 friends, Mark and Melanie Grignani, and because we weren't tied to any distribution deal when we made the movie in terms of content, I could make the movie exactly the way I wanted to make it.
Is that an experience you want to repeat?
No, I mean, because realistically, with a lot of the movies that I make or want to make, with the caliber of actors I want to use and with the resources that I would need to make them, I can't be financing movies on my own that cost $10 million. Case in point, my next feature film is a script that I wrote. I'm directing it. I'm the cinematographer, and I'm one of the 2 principal producers, and I don't have final cut. The people who are putting up the money have final cut, which is fine. It's the way the film industry works. Having the political savvy to go through this industry and to create things that resonate with people and be able to thread that needle of what they want as opposed to what you think you want to do is going to determine how you survive in this industry.
I appreciate, in some of the research we've done on you, there's this pragmatism of like, you can dream, but this is ultimately a doing thing. If you could put together a recipe of like what it takes for that young person to move from social media to feature films, like what would be some traits, some skills, some qualities? You mentioned collaboration. What else?
Certainly a realistic view of who you are and what you think your value is in the area that you're trying to get into, and not an overinflated idea of what you think your value is. When Megan is Missing started to go viral on TikTok in 2020, one of my sons came running into the room and said, "Dad, you're famous. You're going viral on TikTok." And I said, "That's not being famous. That's going to go up like this for 2 weeks, and then it's going to go straight down, and something else will take its place." So what you do with your life, with your creative impulses, with your art, that means something to you, you have to find some commercial outlet for. I very rarely write a script that I haven't already figured out where I'm going to take it. I need to know the effort that I'm spending in creating something is going to get somewhere. That's just kind of like the reality for me. But in the context of working on various jobs and stuff like that, ultimately what you do is you find the aesthetic that works for the job that you're in, that you agreed to do. The people who say, well, I'm not going to take a job until it's the right one and it's and that job is what I want to do. Well, that person could be waiting a very, very long time for an opportunity. The reality is that you get farther in the industry if you get yourself on set. The more that you are actually exposed to an actual production environment, the more people that you meet, the more feelers that you have. You start to build a network of contacts and people to draw from when you need help with this or that. But if you isolate yourself and say, well, this is beneath me, I'm not going to do this, then you just kind of stay in your room until maybe something else comes along, maybe it doesn't.
It's sort of the risk you take, and I often say in my line of work, the goal is to get warmer. I'm not going to land on the perfect lily pad, but are you at least moving in the right direction? And you got to get out.
Yeah, people ask Tommy Lee Jones, why did you make so many crappy movies? Why did you act in so many crappy movies in the 1970s?
He was in crappy movies? I'm just kidding.
And he said, I was always an actor. I was never a waiter. I was never a truck driver. I was never worked in a factory. I was always an actor. And if I was offered 3 crappy movies, I would take the least crappy of the 3. But I was always on set. And I was always performing and honing in on my craft.
Yeah. When you say, when you're creating and using this limited time you have on the earth, right, to do what you do, and that it's important for you to get somewhere, can you say more about what you mean by that it gets somewhere? Is that eyeballs? Is that impact? How do you measure it as a man in the world?
First and foremost, you need to understand what's important in your life.
Yeah.
Because that sort of dictates and rules everything. And I have no really kind of way to judge where I am in the industry. I know people will come up to me and say, wow, I really look up to you and your work and you've achieved so much and stuff. But I always kind of feel like I'm on the verge of achieving something, but I haven't gotten there yet. That's kind of a pervasive thing that's always sort of there. And maybe it's the thing that drives me to get up every day and take another stab at it. But it's something that has not changed my entire life. And the other thing that's a given for me is that my family is number one. Making movies and television shows is not my life. It's my job. My job pays for my life. My life is my wife and kids. That is not to say that I don't love my job. I do like my job, and I'm very good at my job, but I don't confuse the two. If I'm contemplating taking on a production, if somebody wants to hire me for something, I filter that through, does it work for my family life first?
Yeah.
Does going off to India or Japan and stuff for an extended period of time work for my family life or not? And that becomes the first consideration. And I recognize very much that when you're young, everything is about getting into the industry. People say, I want to live, eat, and breathe movies. But the fact of the matter is that if all you do for your entire waking existence is think about getting into the industry, then you have completely cut yourself off from the very life experiences that you need in order to be successful in this industry. If you do virtual reality of flying in a glider instead of actually flying in a glider, if you read a Hollywood trade paper instead of a book, you are eliminating the very things that you need to survive in this industry as a creative individual. And so trying to find that balance, that life, family, work balance is something that I try to instill in the people that I mentor early on. because I've been in this business long enough to see so many people just go dry. They lose their the spark that led them to want to be in the business in the first place, and it's because they've deprived themselves of sensory essentials that you need, to be a functioning human being and therefore to be creative.
Yeah. How has your family, part of what I want to ask is how have they mentored you? How have they influenced you in how you think and how you engage and how you're taught? Because I just want to acknowledge, Michael, at this point in your career, you're doing a lot of mentoring, I would imagine. And that I wonder how you find that rewarding. So here, that's the one question. The other question is, how are you mentored? How does it come to you?
It's interesting. My wife asked me one time, because I'd been mentoring a lot of people for quite a while, and she asked me, what do I get out of it? She says, I see what they get out of it in terms of advancement and all this stuff, but I don't know what you get out of it exactly. And I didn't really know kind of how to answer that at the time. But we were at a function, an industry function one time, and one of the people that I had mentored, and she was a young lady. I met her when she was 19, I believe, and recognized that she had really an incredible talent and a gift for visual expression and stuff. So I helped her develop that and helped open the doors to different things that it was ultimately her responsibility to take it up or not, or, to make something out of those opportunities. And she did. And she rose to a level in the industry that was really quite phenomenal. And my wife and I were at a function, and she came up to me and she said, you gave me my entire life. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't met you. She says it wasn't just the professional contacts. It wasn't just, the teaching me the techniques that you have for what you do. It was also the conversations about the balance of life and about family and everything. And when she went away, my wife said, okay, now I know what you get out of it.
Yeah. If I can just stay with it for a second, what's coming up for you as you talk about that? Like emotionally, what comes up for you? What do you feel?
Oh, well, I mean, for me, it's the validation that you make a difference. Like, I don't know that anything that I shoot or direct will ever have a life outside of me. I can't really quantify my own work in that way. Maybe 100 years from now, somebody will say, wow, Michael Goy did some great stuff, but the thing that has value to me is that I've enabled somebody else to pursue their dream and enhance their life. And it's funny because James Cameron, I was just talking with Jim. James Cameron came running up to me at an award show one time, and he was pulling a man behind him, and he says, Michael, this man is a brain surgeon. He actually saves lives. What you and I do is bullshit. He saves lives. I was like, I completely agree, Jim. I totally agree, And I don't know, it's interesting because at one seminar, somebody said, he was asking a question. He said, all you people in Hollywood, you directors, cinematographers, you make me sick. Because all you care about is money. And I responded to him. I said, you know what, sir, you're absolutely right. All I care about is money, because the money enables me to make sure that my kids will be able to go to college, that we can keep a roof over our heads and not live in desperation. And also enables me to put money into things that I feel like are important, like Megan is missing, like endeavors to find lost movies and make them available, things that I think are make a difference in this world. Money enables me to do that. So you're absolutely right. All I think about is money.
Yeah. Well, I asked what was coming up for you because I found something was coming up for me as you were telling that story. So I was just like, my clinical instinct is to stay with a feeling when it comes up. My taking care of you instinct is like, keep it moving. No one wants to feel emotion. Hey, it is what it is. all I have is what's coming up in my body and what I'm experiencing, listening to a story or what people are saying. And so what was coming up for me was this experience that so many people I work with have of, I don't have any time for that. I work with a lot of people who are very successful and being asked to do a lot in their work. And then they have, let's call her Margaret, comes to their door, their office, and says, I need help or I have a question. And everybody becomes an interruption. That's what's coming up for me is I believe strongly no one is. And so your thoughts on mentoring and someone coming up to you and saying, like, you changed my life. Is it as important as having creative freedom to make something meaningful? I'm hearing you say maybe, if not more.
Well, I mean, the choices we make in this world. I mean, I'm not sure if in your research you came across when I was president of the American Society of Cinematographers, I would write a president's column every issue of the magazine, American Cinematographer magazine. And there was one column that I wrote in 2009, December of 2009, for the holiday issue, that people still bring up when they see me. And it was about what is my favorite experience in the movie business. And I wrote about what it was, and it was this very small movie called What Matters Most that got very limited distribution. I had already agreed to do a different movie at the time that the producer, who I had done a couple of movies with, called me and asked me to meet with the writer-director of this movie. And I said, well, I'm already committed. And she said, well, just meet with her. So I met with the director. Her name is Jane Cusimano. And she had written this script, and it was a fairly standard Romeo and Juliet type of script about a girl from the poor side of the tracks who falls in love with a boy from the rich side of the tracks. But Jane's husband was liquidating some of his companies to raise the money to make the movie. And her daughter Polly was going to star in it, so they wanted it to be a family picture, a family kind of project. And because Jane had advanced breast cancer and she was undergoing chemotherapy, but she only had realistically 3 or 4 months to live. And this is at the time that I met her. So they were in a rush to get this movie done, as a kind of a family legacy before she passed away. And, she said, I don't have time to look through hundreds of cinematographer reels. The producer said, you're the person who could keep the production going on those days when I have to go to chemotherapy. I'm going to be very disoriented and stuff like that. We need to keep the movie going, So I quit my other job and I agreed to do this one. And I left the next day for Vega, Texas, which is a town of 800 people. I brought all my regular crew. So I had experienced people working with me, and we made the movie. And we scheduled fewer scenes on the day that Jane was going to do chemotherapy treatments, so that she would miss as little of the process of making the movie as possible. I brought on the editor. We edited the movie very quickly, and I had to leave for Morocco to shoot another movie. But I gave all my notes, my color timing notes, before I left. A week after I got to Morocco, I got a call from Jim, her husband, that Jane had passed away a couple of days earlier. But she had a chance to go to the lab and see the final movie and see, everything with the music, sound, everything put together, projected in their theater. So, and she was very proud of it. And she told Jim, tell Michael, thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
That's my best experience in the film industry. And it had nothing to do with really the quality of my work on that movie or whether that movie ended up being a hugely popular thing to watch or whatever. It's entirely based on the experience of making it.
Yeah. It's bringing to mind, I was just talking to someone earlier today who is struggling in his marriage, a client. And, we were talking about the seasons of just walking through a season with someone that's difficult. And, the journey being what is so precious, but we're all so quick, right, to get to. And I wonder if this is the question behind the vehemence or the vitriol of the guy who's like, all you want to do is make money. Like, we as consumers don't get to engage with things along the process of being made,
But that's probably a good thing, because
You think so?
if you are part of the process, if you understand the process, then I think in some ways you don't enjoy or find your own personal value in what it is that you're experiencing. I'm okay with the fact that most of the people who watch what I do are not going to understand what it took to do it. It's not their responsibility, really. Their responsibility is to just watch it and see if anything in it resonates for them. It may not. But in some ways, it's like I need the audience to be objective. I was just talking with my editor on Rookie Feds about this yesterday. The last thing I want is for an editor to be on set with me, to see what I'm going through to get a shot, to understand what I'm giving up. The only thing I want the editor to do is to look at the footage that I have done and see what I actually accomplished and then what could be made out of that. It doesn't matter this or that happened or I didn't get this or that. It's we all have different roles to play in that chain of creation and exhibition, and the audience has theirs. They will decide what's important for them.
I'm going to ask you this question, just curious what comes to mind first, which is the last time you were affected in some kind of way watching something that's memorable for you.
Well, all the time. I mean, you could see, I'm in my theater right here.
Yeah, you are.
I have over 20,000 movies in my home movie collection.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Every day, every night, mostly, since I don't sleep until 2 o'clock in the morning. Usually, I'll watch a movie and I'll let that movie say to me whatever that movie is trying to say. I appreciate the bad movies as much as I appreciate the good movies, because nobody sets out to make a bad movie. And it's fascinating to me, A, that somebody got it done, and B, what were they trying to achieve and where did it not work? Maybe I appreciate the effort. When I watch something like The Creeping Terror, which is a supremely bad movie.
That I'm writing down.
It's fascinating to me that it takes a lot of effort to finish a movie.
Yes.
And so it takes a lot of effort to finish even a bad movie. So, the fact that the movie is finished is astounding, and the fact that it's a good movie is really a miracle. The whole process is fascinating to me.
So you allow yourself to be affected. I was talking to my partner last night about interviewing you today. It's probably the most we've talked about someone I'm interviewing in a while. I was nervous to do it. And I also noticed what was coming up for me, Michael, was like, I don't know a lot about this stuff. I take in movies, and I haven't watched a movie lately where I feel, right? And I'm a human being where I just right, you just want to feel something. I also watch more movies now with Arnie than I ever have in my life. So I'm starting to think, really interrogate my experience of enjoying film. And he's like, well, what if you just don't enjoy movies? And I was like, I'm absolutely unwilling to admit that. Do you think that's possible? That someone just doesn't enjoy movies?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, they'll enjoy something else. It doesn't have to necessarily be, a movie. My kids will watch movies, but I couldn't honestly say that they're in love with movies. A long time ago, back when I was in film school, One of the other people in school, this young woman, said to me, well, I'm not really creative. And I said, well, that's bullshit. Everybody's creative. You just haven't found the right outlet for your creativity. You know, maybe it's not making movies. Maybe it's baking the perfect souffle. Maybe it's, you know, any number of millions of things that you could possibly do, but you're trying to measure yourself against what you see everybody else doing and comparing yourself to that. And I said, you know, as soon as you stop doing that, you will find what you're creative at, you know?
Yeah. The other follow-up to that was that I remember being affected by more movies when I was, let's say, between the ages of 13 and 21 than I am now. What do you make of that? Do you think that's a thing? Like, when you see a movie being important?
Yeah. I mean, movies are my window, really, to the world and to experiences maybe that I want to pursue. But that age range that you're talking about is kind of like a great time when you and your consciousness and your body and everything are developing all at the same time, and you're figuring out what the world is going to be for you. The marvelous thing about kids, because I work a lot with kids, is that they don't have any rules. You know, you stay up all night with a kid working on a scene and they're like, yeah, all right, this is cool. Life can be like this, sure. You know, but as we come into adulthood, you know, you settle into these routines, you decide what you like and you don't like, and you cut yourself off from that feeling of, oh yeah, whatever comes up, sure. I'll decide if this is good or if this is bad. That's at the core of also creativity, really. You know, it's you stagnate and you start pounding yourself into a monotonous routine, a schedule, because there's comfort in it. There's comfort in having a routine. But the routine also then suppresses your ability to be open to other stuff that you haven't experienced before. And I talk about this when I talk about job interviews, interviewing for jobs, and about anything that has to do with the creative impulses, is that you have to be comfortable with not knowing what's going to happen. I always tell people that it's not fear of failure that makes people fail. It's fear of success, because everybody fails in life, and we've all developed mechanisms to deal with failure. You know, when I fail at this, I'm going to go out with my friends and do this or whatever. We have ways to make ourselves feel better when we fail, but there's no mechanism to deal with success, because success means when you succeed at something, you have done something that you have never done before. That's the very definition of success. And then that leads to having to make a decision of what path to follow next, both of which you have never done before. And if you happen to choose the right one and you succeed at that, then that opens up more doors that you have never gone through before. So being successful, not just even in the film industry, but at anything in life, means being comfortable with constantly opening doors that you have never gone through before. And people freak out about that. So they retreat into failure because they know what that feels like. It's the barrier, I think, that most people come up against is, oh, well, you know, they talk themselves out of being successful. They talk themselves out of trying the thing that they've never done before. And I've always taken the point of view that every day I need to do something that's different, something that I haven't done before, something that I haven't experienced before, watched something that I haven't watched before. I tell people, you know, if you're afraid of trying something new, if you feel like you've drummed yourself into a routine, get out of bed on a different side of the bed tomorrow, because everybody probably gets out on the same side of the bed. I said, just get out on a different side and just stand on the floor for a minute. You've immediately changed your world and your entire existence. I said, it's that simple. And you do little things like that every single day, and you become comfortable with the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not novel, but I call them micro movements. I mean, these are just small adjustments to everyday life. And, you know, everyone's looking to optimize and like reset and, we're into spring, and spring is this whole season of like creation, right? And these big moments. And when someone like you or not someone like me says like, get out of bed on the different side, they're like, get out of here. What difference does that make? The truth is, I think what we're saying is like what those amount to, we can't know. So yeah, what difference does it make? That's exactly the question, right? It's like, we don't know. Let's see. Are you consciously, Michael, intentionally choosing I'm going to do something new? Or are you staying present for like, well, that was new, I didn't even notice? Or is it both?
I don't think at this point in my life it's really a conscious thing that I have to encourage or think about, I'm going to try this. It just kind of happens as a reflex.
Yeah.
Back when I was shooting American Horror Story, my gaffer, John McGowan, and I had this rule that we would never light the same set the same way twice the entire season. It's part of the reason why that show looked the way that it did, is because it was a constant stream of finding a different idea, finding a different thing. But in general, though, as I progress through my day and my life and stuff like that, those opportunities sort of present themselves because I'm open to them happening. I had somebody, a young woman who was shadowing me on my last episode of Rookie Feds, and every now and then she would ask me when we're on set, she'd say, what are you thinking about right now? I couldn't really explain it at the time, but I explained to her the other day. I said, the reality is that my brain is like thinking it's piecing things from all kinds of different disparate things all at the same time. And when you ask me, what am I thinking about? Everything stops and I'm thinking, okay, what one of these 20 things that I was thinking of do I want to say I was thinking of? My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I feel like part of what we're doing in life is just befriending our brain, and stop judging it and stop thinking it should be this way or that way or that way, and just be like, this is my brain, and I have deep compassion for it, and I'm going to try and be around people who are curious about it too. Were you surprised when you said to your parents, I want to do this, that they were like, well, then you should? Was that a surprise?
No, it was not. Because, my parents were very supportive. I mean, my mom and dad were both born in California, but they were put in internment camps during World War II, with a lot of the Japanese American community, on the West Coast. And ultimately, when they settled down in Chicago and started having kids, my sister and myself, I think they wanted us to be so American that it wouldn't happen to us. So they were very encouraging. My mom is still alive. My dad passed away last year, but they were very encouraging about pursuing dreams, and which is a really bold thing for people who had all of their dreams taken away from them. To continually say, this is America and you can be anything you want to be. So I was not surprised when they said, well, then you should go off to Hollywood and you should make movies, and supported that. And, when I talked to John Chu, my friend John Chu, who directed Crazy Rich Asians, his mom and dad run a Chinese restaurant, and in an Asian community, you have a Chinese restaurant, your kids are going to work in the Chinese restaurant. And John said his parents never allowed them to work in the restaurant because, he said, my mom said, I don't want you to grab the low-hanging fruit. I want you to aim higher.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what my parents wanted for me.
I'm having another experience of thinking about, this, you can do it, believing in people. And I'm thinking, Michael, about just your capacity for that. To those people out there who their calendars, everyone's busy. You could say we even glorify being busy. What would you say to people who maybe don't feel like, I don't feel I can really do what I've dreamed about doing? Maybe they didn't have parents who said that they could, so they followed a path and now they're 40. And they're like, there's no time left. So that's one question. And the second one is how do you increase your capacity to be generous? I know Christina has found you to be one of the most generous people she's ever met. And I think, there is a myth that when you give it just exhausts. So can you answer those two questions, a little bit about both?
In terms of the first, I mean, I'm reminded of the movie Bull Durham, where Tim Robbins becomes convinced that if he does this certain thing, he will win baseball games. If he doesn't, he will not. And absolutely right. If you convince yourself that it's not possible to do something, you won't do it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're just giving yourself permission not to do it.
That's right.
And then also, along the same lines, it's okay to fail. One of the things that I try to emphasize to film students is that film school is a great place to fail, to try things and not have it work, because there are no long-standing repercussions in the industry if you fail at something in film school. But lately, a lot of film schools have been just drumming the idea in their students' heads that they have to just make something perfect before they leave, because that'll be your calling card into the industry. And so they hammer themselves into a smaller, more conventional box, creative box, in order to fulfill those marching orders. And I shot 125 student films in the 4 years that I was a student at Columbia College in Chicago, and I fucked up every single one of them, but I did it in different ways, experimenting, seeing what would happen if I did this and that. So I came out of my college education with a complete lack of fear. I fear not being bold enough.
Yeah, fucking up in different ways, like that being kind of the invitation. I hear you on the pressure of get it right, work at it until it's right, and then put it out. My response to that is like, what is right? Also, like, we don't even know. Like, I'm looking at all these movies behind you. What is right to me? What is the subjectivity of life is the beauty of it.
Yes, and we should be constantly in that mode of rewriting what the rules are. It's like this big stew where you keep throwing things from 2 days ago into it, and it gets better and better and better. I mean, that's what life really should be. I think mentoring is more important than anything I will actually direct or shoot. It doesn't take that much effort to help somebody make their dreams come true, really. Sometimes it's just a phone call, or, a reference to somebody else who maybe knows more about this particular subject than you do. But a lot of people won't take the time. For some reason, they feel like it's an infringement upon them or whatever. Probably the most valuable thing that I can give to somebody is my complete honesty about what it takes for me to be in this industry. If they're looking up at me as somebody who they gauge as being successful, well, then they should have an accurate picture of what that's like for me. So, when I'm mentoring somebody, if they're going to shadow, I always arrange to have them come on the days that I know are going to be the worst days of the production, when everything is going to go wrong, because it doesn't teach them anything to see everything go like clockwork. They need to be there when, the wind machines for the hurricane scene have not shown up, when the condor with the major light for the night scene won't go up in the air. What do I do? And it's in those moments when just not shooting is not an option. You have to do something. That's when I want those people that I'm mentoring there, standing behind me, watching, when I'm in my most vulnerable position. That will then determine the filmmaker that I actually am.
What's something changing in your industry that you're happy about? Finally, it's changing, or you see it as a positive? And what's something that you're sort of cautious about witnessing the change? We have the benefit of getting, your wisdom and decades accrued. So how would you sort of summarize that?
I mean, there's an active effort to change the landscape of people who work in the industry in terms of gender, in terms of, race. And I'm the co-chair of the Television Diversity Task Force for the DGA. I've always tried to hammer home the point that a lot of it is about not reaching a certain percentage of this or that. It's about just having the doors open so so everybody can get in and prove what it is that they can do, because traditionally in the past the doors weren't open. It's a process. I mean, I know people want overnight change, and some organizations have tried to affect it as an overnight solution. It doesn't work that way. And it also doesn't work if you just hammer at the door and scream at the wind that this needs to change, because you need to be on the inside to change things. You can't change anything from the outside, even if you're right. It doesn't work that way. You have to learn how that organization or that structure or whatever works, how it functions, and then you need to get into it and be on the inside of it in order to really affect meaningful change.
What are you seeing changing that you're like, ooh, well, we'll see?
There's a lot of interest in technology, in the motion picture industry. And I actually sit on the boards of many technology enterprises. And I consider myself to be the lowest tech person that I know. But somehow I've been looked upon as somebody who is at the cutting edge forefront of technologies like virtual production and all of this, and which is fine. I'm the end user. I can't pretend to know all the science behind stuff. All I know is what is the creative application. What can I, as a creative individual, do with this technology? How do I use it to more effectively tell my stories? That's the value of technology to me. But, when you start to only care about the technology, when your ideas for what you want to make are motivated by the technology that you have available to you, that's kind of like putting the cart before the horse for me. The first thing has to be the human experience. And what does this say about what you want to say about the world? And then how does the technology help you get there? The Titanic wasn't sunk by an iceberg. It was sunk by people's unfailing belief that technology would save them. Technology isn't going to save you. It can help you when it's properly applied. People are motivated toward technology for different reasons. There are people who think, wow, it's really cool. I can create this AI interpretation of what this character is and stuff like that. And all that's fine. But people are also motivated by, beliefs that, if we do this, then it's going to save us gobs of money and time and stuff like that. Pretty much none of which is true. It's just trying to grasp a brass ring that doesn't exist.
As always, thank you so much for listening to Who's Missing. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. It only takes a few seconds and truly makes a huge difference. And if you want to hear from us more than just once a week, you can follow us on Instagram or check out our website where you can subscribe to our newsletter, read about our guests, check out a bunch of awesome resources, or send us a message if you have questions or comments. Feedback is welcome. Sounds great, right? Yeah, join us. What are you waiting for? Visit us at www.who'smissingpodcast.com or on IG at Who's Missing Podcast. Talk to you soon.